there are a lot of people coming into the field right now that are like, they know lots about AI and know lots about how to use these tools, but they don't really know any of the fundamental concepts, and they're basically unhirable because they can only get the job done using AI, and that's a real severe limitation for those people. Things I would focus on are the concepts, because the tools are going to change, right? You know that every 6 months we've got new large language. Gemini's the best. Next 2 months later, ChatGPT is the best. Next a month later, Claude's the best. You know, there's always going to be another model, but the concepts behind them don't change. And so I like personally, because I'm a concept kind of guy, I like emphasizing those, because that's learning that you can take with you for the rest of your life. You didn't just learn how to like do something really cool with Gemini only to be out of date in 6 months. So it's
Yeah.
important. It's important to focus early, especially early on. It's important to focus on things that will last. You know, knowledge that won't just last, won't expire in 6 months. So I would focus on theory and try not, I mean, obviously play with the models, but don't get wed to any specific one, right? Because they're going to change. Each one's going to be good at different things. And it's good to just, be flexible, because that landscape's always going to be changing.
It's true.
And so be prepared to move and change and adapt as needed.
AI can write code, it can analyze the data, and it can explain better than most of the classrooms. Then, why do we need concepts in this age of AI? Or are we slowly outsourcing our thinking? So, in today's conversation with Josh Starmer, who is the mind behind StatQuest, which I'm sure you might have stumbled upon one or the other time while you were looking for some great explanation for a statistical concept, we are going to dive deep into the questions that why concepts matter more than they ever have in this age of AI, why understanding is better than memorization, and how you start. How you start and still make a place for yourself, and how you adapt to this fast changing world. And if you still want to stay relevant and you are struggling with it, and you are struggling with the point that where do you start, this conversation is for you. And as it is said, that well begun is half done. So let's get you half done. And if this conversation rings a bell in your mind, do not forget to ring the subscription bell for me. So let's go.
And the only thing I would say before we start is double bam.
That's great.
So, welcome to the show. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Josh Starmer. I run a YouTube channel called StatQuest with Josh Starmer, and I also have books. So I guess I'm technically also a writer. But anyways, for the most part, I try to teach data science topics like statistics and dimension reduction and neural networks and machine learning and things like that.
And you teach them in a way that everyone can understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then
Thank you
I
very
want to
much.
ask, when did you thought of starting such a channel? Was there any gap that you noticed in the understanding of these topics which led you to start StatQuest?
Well, yeah, so originally I used to work in a genetics lab. I was the guy who did all the computation in a genetics lab. And everyone did experiments and they gave me their data, and I would do the analysis. But I felt like one of the things is the people doing the experiments were doing very hard expensive, time consuming. Everything about them was just like painful. And I wanted them to be comfortable with me doing the analysis. And part of that meant establishing trust between the two of us, that they could trust me to do the best job possible. And the way I thought was the best way to establish trust between the two of us was for them to actually understand what I was doing. Because if they could understand it, then they'd be like, oh, I get it. I see why you're doing this. I see why, I understand the results, blah, blah, blah. And so I started teaching, basic stats to my coworkers, just so they could understand what a t-test is, or what is a p-value, and things like that. And the channel sort of came from that. The channel specifically was sort of a solution to two problems I had in the lab. One problem was it was an academic lab, and so new people joined all the time. And so that meant if I taught the t-test this semester, I'd have to teach it again 6 months later, and then 6 months after that. Um, and YouTube, when you post a YouTube video, you don't have to do it
Yeah,
every 6 months. You just do it the one time. And the other thing was, I like the idea of people learning things when they need to know them
yeah,
rather than when I have time to teach them, because those are very different things. I could teach someone how to do a t-test, and they may not actually need to actually do a t-test for 6 months or a year for now, because especially with these specific experiments that took forever to do. Um, so I wanted them to be able to like, okay, I'm doing this thing. Now I need to know this. I need to know what a t-test is, or I need to know what r
yeah.
squared means. And the video allows it to be sort of on their terms. They can watch the video when they're ready. And so YouTube was to me a solution to two problems I had. One was, like I said, one was I only had to teach once, and two, people could learn when they wanted. And so that was the real inspiration behind the channel. And if you've watched any of my early videos, and I know you've seen a few, um, all the examples are in the terms of mouse genetics, and
Yes.
that was something I was trying to do at the time. In that statistics is typically taught in a really abstract way. They'll say, "Okay, imagine you've got an urn with two different colors of marbles in it," or something like that. And that takes a lot of imagination to actually understand how that then applies to your specific experiment with mice. And so I wanted to reframe or rephrase the language of statistics into a language that my coworkers could understand. And so I did everything in the language of mouse genetics. And so that was helpful for them. But over time, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Originally, just my coworkers watched the videos, but over time, other people started watching them, and as a result, I had to change the language a little bit to make it a little more approachable from people
Yeah.
that weren't also mouse geneticists. But anyways, that's where the channel comes from.
And what was the reaction of your colleagues when they first saw the video and you explaining everything? Like you broke down such complex concepts into so small and simple concepts. So what was their reaction?
Well, I'll be honest. I wasn't very good at explaining things early on. I wasn't born good at it. That's for sure. And so I think the initial reaction to my very early stuff was just a look of confusion from everybody in the room. And they were like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so I had to kind of work and learn how to better communicate with my specific audience, which are my coworkers.
Yeah.
And that took a long time before I finally got good at it. And interestingly enough, I don't work in the lab anymore. I left 6 years ago, but I still go back to the lab every couple of months, and I present whatever I'm working on to see how they react to it. And they still look completely like dumbfounded and like, "What are you doing? This doesn't make any sense." And I go back and I revise everything according to the feedback I get from them. And so they've been really helpful for me over the years. But unfortunately, it hasn't always been just sort of magic for them. It's been magic for other people. But for them, it's more like, why are we doing this?
So, I mean, I know that it's hard to communicate with the wet lab people when you want to explain them all the analysis part of it.
Hmm.
I mean, it's difficult to convince them that what we are doing is correct and it's actually in lines with what you have done because sometimes when the results are not matching, they are very skeptical of maybe you did something wrong. So, was there any time, in your work where you felt, okay, I'm finding it hard to convince them that what I'm doing is right? And
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, so there was lots of that. I mean, that's sort of how I learned what I was doing is, and sometimes I was wrong. I'll be honest. That they were like, no, the results should be this, and I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. I mislabeled something. Um, but But beyond that, yeah, I just had to learn how to communicate exactly what we did, and to help them understand that there wasn't a mistake. And I taught them a lot of what I did, and actually ultimately over time they actually could do the analyses on their own without me doing them for them. And that's one of the reasons why I left working in the lab 6 years ago, is that the work in the lab was drying up, and fortunately, my YouTube channel was growing at that. It still grows, but at that point, it was like growing enough that it was feasible for me to sort of jump off and see if I could stand on my own. And fortunately, I've succeeded, and that's been a real satisfying.
Wow. And when you switched your job to being a full-time YouTuber and an educator, how was that switch from you that now you don't have to go to the lab every day and you can
Yeah.
just make the videos and do what you love? So how was that switch? Was that a smooth transition or you missed the lab after leaving?
Yeah, it was really scary. I'd worked in the lab for a long time. I worked in the lab for 13 years. And it was really scary to leave. And I didn't know if I would actually succeed. I'd saved up some money. I'd saved up some money, so I knew I could make it through the year no matter what. As long as I didn't do anything extravagant, I could survive. But but it was scary. It was a little weird not having coworkers. I liked my coworkers, but over time, we figured out ways to meet up anyways. Like one of my I end up hanging out with them anyways, I guess. And so even though they're not my coworkers, they're my friends, and that's
Yeah.
nice. And we spend a lot of time together. I've got some of them coming over tomorrow night, and we're gonna hang out, and I'm looking forward to that. But it was scary, and so what I did is I gave myself a goal, which was to make. My goal for the first year as a YouTuber was to make as much money as I did when I first left graduate school, which wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to live off of. And so, I mean, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't making a fraction of that. I did the math, and I realized I was making less money per hour than someone who bags your groceries. So when you buy your groceries, someone puts them in a bag sometimes, not always, but sometimes they do. And that person who puts the groceries in the bag was getting paid more than me. And I was like, well, okay, so that's not very good. And so I had to come up with various ways to increase my revenue. And
Yeah.
one way I could do that was make more videos, but another, ultimately, I started making these little PDF study guides,
Hmm.
and I was selling those as part of, you watch the video and you're like, and you can, and I'd sell them at what I thought was a pretty reasonable price. So you could print it out, or you could have it on your iPad or whatever. And I started making those, and ultimately those led to me writing books, which is something I never thought I'd ever do in my whole life, is write a book. Um, but but yeah, so that's, and ultimately I managed to achieve my goal. I was able to stay afloat on my own, and that's worked out really.
Oh my God. Wow. I mean, in this situation, I would have literally panicked. I
Yeah,
would have panicked.
I panicked a little bit, that's for sure. I mean, it was very scary. It's one of the scariest things I've ever done. I'm not necessarily an entrepreneur. Some people are just natural entrepreneurs, and all they
Yeah.
want to do is start up companies and kind of do their own thing. I've always been sort of like a team player, like, if you imagine like a job or a work, a group of people, of coworkers, as like a rock and roll band. I imagine myself as like the bass player. Usually it's the bass player doesn't go solo. It's the singer who goes solo. And I
Yeah.
always thought of myself as someone who supported other people, but didn't wasn't the star of the show. And so that was weird to kind of like go off and do my own thing. But it was also, I was scared of the money. And one of the things I did kind of early on, and I think a lot of people do. I've talked to a lot of people that sort of left and tried to do their own thing. Is you go, I started consulting. I started doing a lot of consulting.
Okay.
And yes, you can make money consulting, and that's great. But it's not, the goal wasn't to do the old job. The goal was to do YouTube full time. And if I'm consulting, I'm not really doing YouTube. So I had to come up with, I was like, no, I can't use consulting. If I use consulting, then I might as well just go back to my old job. And so that's when I started trying to get creative, and that's when I came up with the study guide idea. And and then everything, all the pieces started falling into place. But I had to set up some barriers and be, even though I could make money doing consulting, I had to like set up some rules and say you can't do it that way, because otherwise you might as well just have not left your job. And so, but yeah, it was very scary. It's one of the scariest things I've done.
I mean, and in this kind of pressure that you had that time when you were making the videos and you had to come up with creative ideas, how did you manage in the world to break down such complex concepts into such simple problems? Like, how do you approach that? I mean, I'm a fan of how you explain RNA-seq. I mean,
Yeah,
every now and then when I'm doing transcriptomics, I would visit that video at least once when I forget something. And I would
yeah,
watch it without skipping, normal speed, and I would be like, okay, now I'm done.
yeah.
So,
So what's the trick to that? The trick to it's like there's a kind of a joke for when you have an interview, and at some point during the interview, the interviewer asks you, you're trying to get the job, and the interviewer says, can you talk about one of your weaknesses? And when you're asked that question, what you're supposed to do is you go, oh yeah, 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 I'm not any good at this. But that's not all. You're then supposed to show how that weakness makes you like a a superhero, right? Like you turn that weakness into a strength. And that's like a standard interview thing. But the way I make videos and the way I break down things is that exact thing, where my weakness is I'm not a very fast learner, and I'm not very good with math. I look at equations and they freak me out. My hands start sweating. Um, and I'm also very visual, and so I take the weakness of the fact that I'm a slow learner and I don't understand the math, and I turn that into my strength. And then I go, well, if I can teach myself this, all I got to do is draw the pictures, because I'm a visual learner. So what I do is, yeah, I look at the equation and I go, oh, that makes me real nervous. And I go, well, can I convert that equation into a picture of something? And that, is there a, is there a way to translate those things? And so I try to figure out a way to visualize it, and that's my way of teaching myself. And it just turns out that the way I teach myself things is the way that helps a lot of people learn things, that when they watch my videos they go, oh, I can see it, it's not just a bunch of math, and it's a nice slow pace, it's not too fast. It's, sometimes people say it's too slow, but whatever, you can speed up the video. But it's slow enough that that it catches most of the people. So those are my tricks right there.
I mean, that's great. I mean, it has helped me through my graduate years, even when now I'm in my PhD.
Oh wow.
And there's like when I'm doing some things, I have a habit that if I don't understand a word, I'll be stuck at it.
Oh yeah.
So when I'm doing a DSeq or anything kind of analysis and there is a statistical test and I'm stuck at it, so my first instinct is I go to your channel and see if you have explained that concept. And if there is a video, I'll watch it and then I'll move forward.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm from a completely biological background.
Okay.
So I started learning maths when I started doing machine learning.
Okay.
But still, seeing the videos is much more appealing to the eyes and to my brain when I see the video, rather than when I just go through the equation.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's fantastic.
How do you know now this video is simple enough to publish and anybody, like you have millions and millions of people watching your videos.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
now you understand that this video is simple enough and now anybody can understand even if they don't have that background.
I mean, if yeah, it's usually I can tell if it's simple enough if I can understand it.
Okay.
And that's my superpower. If it makes sense to me, it'll probably make sense to a lot of other people. That's usually just my threshold. I mean, there are some tricks to it, in that um, it's sometimes easy to kind of jump from one concept to another without thinking about how they're related and what the transition should be. And I still have to catch myself on that stuff every now and then where I go, what's the transition between this slide and the next slide? Am I assuming anything? Is it smooth? How does it follow? And so I think about, when I think about teaching and I think about making a video, I think more, obviously I think about the concepts, but I also think about if this was just a story, just a short story, would anyone be able to read it and make sense of it, right? And so without the visuals even, will it stand alone? And oftentimes that way of thinking about it lends itself to making me doing lots of revisions. Because usually it can't stand alone. There's a lot of things missing, and I go, well, what are those things, and how can I include those? But mostly, if I understand it, everyone else will understand it too. It's, yeah.
Like it's a self you are it's like a self-inspection process that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
And I have this question. I mean, you are at a level where, so many people are watching you. So do you feel that kind of pressure on you that when I make the video, nothing can go wrong? I mean, you have to check so many resources and read so much of stuff.
Yeah. It's I hate making mistakes, but I always make mistakes. And some mistakes are stupid mistakes and don't make it, are insignificant. Maybe it's a better way to put it. They're typos, or like I misspelled something. I make those mistakes left and right. But some mistakes are concepts. Like I misunderstood something. Like I thought I understood it and I got it wrong. Those second types of mistakes are really scary, because I feel like personally responsible. Like if somebody watches my video and they get the wrong idea or they get the wrong concept, I feel I'd be very nervous about that. And so I almost always sort of run my material by other people. I never just make a video and then post it without other people having seen it first and giving me some feedback, because I'm not confident enough. I mean, I'm often correct all the time, but I'm just, the responsibility is so great that I feel like it's important for me to double check and make sure that that the content is factually correct, and that the way I'm illustrating something does have a one-to-one correspondence with the equation, and I'm not missing something. And every now and then something slips through, and that's a real embarrassment for me, and I've had to take those videos down. But overall, it's been pretty rare, which is great because it's super stressful when I make a big mistake. And so that's only happened like once or twice where I've really kind of bombed it. And fortunately, I got called out on it pretty soon, so it wasn't like a video that a billion people saw. It was like a video that maybe 150 people saw, but it's still super embarrassing, right? But yeah, I mean, yeah, making mistakes is something I do all the time in terms of like little misspelling mistakes and things like that. And those are embarrassing too. And people call me out in the comments and they'll put little things like, you misspelled this or whatever. I'm like, yeah, right. I did. And it's a little rough when you have millions of people pointing out all the flaws, little tiny flaws that you make, because everybody makes little tiny flaws. But overall, you kind of get used to it as well.
Has there been a moment when you had to take down a video because of some typo or something, and that video took literally a lot of efforts to make? I mean, I know all of your
Oh
videos
yeah.
have such animations.
Yeah. No, they all take a long time. Yeah, I don't think I've ever taken a video down for something as simple as a typo. I had one video that had a concept error, and I actually can't even remember which video that is. But the nice thing is what I did is I just took it down, corrected it, and then reposted it. So it wasn't like I had to start from
Yeah.
scratch. So it was embarrassing. and I lost, some metrics or whatever, and a little bit of revenue, but that's okay. I'd rather be right, and put the effort in. I mean, I put so much effort into making the original video. It'd be a shame for the whole thing to be a loss, so I can just go in and fix the one little thing, and repost it, and then we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very authentic to say that you would lose some revenue to be right. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of thing is only there with the educators because there are YouTubers that are there for just a commercial profit. So it doesn't matter if you're
Yeah.
right or if you're not. But
Yeah.
being in the field like academia, it just feels righteous to be right than rather to be more rich.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I see it is, I mean, I'm happy. I've got a house. I live in a house. I eat food. I'm doing fine. I don't need tons of money. It'd be nice to have, but I have my basic needs met, and my goal isn't to make money. My goal's always been to educate from the get go,
Yeah.
and like I was saying, establish trust, and in order to maintain that trust, I have to correct myself when it's necessary.
That's that's literally a very wise thing to say, and that's very rare to hear these days.
Well, thanks.
And I want to ask, since now there is a wave of artificial intelligence and neural networks and deep learning, so there is like an audience that is self-taught, and
Hmm.
then there is an audience that comes from doing degrees in artificial intelligence and all of that. So, what do you think these two types of audience have an approach towards the learning? Because, and which one is better? For example, I'm always confused at should I do a master's on the side in artificial intelligence? Or should I just do the projects? How should I approach this information that's coming just and it's getting updated every day? Like
Yeah.
all the time, it's getting updated. So, how
Yeah.
do you think that people should approach it?
I mean, I would think real long. I mean, I'm sure different people have different opinions about this thing. So, and this is just my opinion, but I would think long and hard about what I really wanted to do and where I wanted to be. AI is a big deal, obviously. It's changing a lot of things, but it's not changing everything, and it's not changing the things it changes. It's not changing as much as you might expect. It's changing coding, so coding is very different from where it used to be a few years ago. That's been a big change, but pretty much everything else is very similar to where it was before. People still have to do basic statistics. People still have to do even basic machine learning. We haven't replaced all of it with large language models like ChatGPT, and I don't think we ever will. It's not financially, reasonable. Like ChatGPT is a huge thing that requires enormous resources, and it's sort of like an atomic bomb. Whereas like you don't need to solve all problems with an atomic bomb, right? You can find other ways that are cheaper, more efficient, more effective, to solve problems. And I think it's important to have knowledge of those alternatives strategies so that you have a lot of options at your disposal. You're not just being like, well, I know how to use this atomic bomb really well.
Yeah.
but it's expensive and nobody really wants to hire me. And actually I talked to some hiring managers not that long ago, and that's what they were talking about too, is that there are a lot of people coming onto the field right now that are like, they know lots about AI and they know lots about how to use these tools, but they don't really know any of the fundamental concepts, and they're basically unhirable because they can only get the job done using AI, and that's a real severe limitation for those people. So, uh, I mean, if you want to go into AI full time and you want to be that AI person, then yeah, you should go for it. But if you want to do not 90% of the work that's going on, it's important to know how to use the tools, right? It's important to know how to code with them. It's important to know how to sort of streamline a lot of things with them. But it's also, I mean, but those are things you can just pick up, right? You don't need to have a master's
Yeah.
degree. Um, in AI to know how to vibe code. You can just figure that out. That's easy. But everything else, like like the basic data science techniques, those things are kind of hard to learn, and it might be helpful to learn them in a structured environment, like in a master's degree. So those are my opinions.
That's, I mean, that sounds correct because I think that right now AI is on such a thing that in my lab or in any lab, we always see where people are using ChatGPT, and sometimes I see. Actually, this morning I was doing some coding. I was making this convolutional neural network, and I asked ChatGPT, "Why am I getting this array? It should just give me one single prediction. It's a sigmoid function." So I should just get one prediction once per sequence, and I have just batch of one. I'm testing it. It said no, you will get the prediction in the array of 200 is to 1 because for each base it has one prediction. And I'm like, and I'm trusting this model almost for everything these days.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I think sometimes it has given me so shit answers that I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to be very careful with those segs.
And okay, and I have a question that for people who are just beginning in the field of artificial intelligence and who want to learn deep learning and who want to build networks, what should be the starting steps for them? From where they should start?
Oh, it kind of depends on, again, sort of what they want to accomplish. There's no sort of one size fits all pathway for everybody. But if they want to get into like the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of how how AI works and how to use it. I mean, there's lots of resources. Obviously, I've got a lot of videos on it. I've got a book on neural networks and AI, and so you can understand technically what's happening. And I've also got PyTorch coding tutorials, so you can code up these things and try them for yourself. And that's a nice route to go. But for other people, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's I don't know. It's sort of really I'm not very good with general things, and I'm better when there's like a real specific, someone says, this is what my goal in life is, and they tell me, and I go, okay, well, let's come up with a plan.
Okay, so let's say if somebody wants to be an AI engineer and they
Yeah,
want to build these deep neural networks for the
yeah,
data analysis and want to get the hidden patterns from the biological data sets,
yeah,
because there's a vast majority of it now.
yeah.
So, how do you think that one should approach for, say, anybody who has a background which is not in computational biology or they know very little of it? So, how should they start in the field?
Yeah. So if they want to be like building their own models, training their own large language models, how would you get started? Well, like I said, I would highly recommend my videos in my book and my tutorials and my coding tutorials. But also, I mean, I'm gonna toot my horn some more. I'm teaching a course with some friends of mine.
Mhm.
Jay Alamar, he's the author of the Illustrated Transformer, and he's got him and this guy Martin, and I can't pronounce his last name, which is embarrassing. But Martin's also teaching. They've got a book called Hands on like Large Language Models, which is a fantastic book. But so it's me, Jay, Martin, Louis Serrano of Serrano Academy, who's just a genius, and this guy Chris McCormick, who's a coding whiz. We're teaching a course in reinforcement learning, which is one of the key technologies for how to build up, um, uh, how to build your own transformers and how to like customize them for real specific use cases. And what I love about it is the way we've balanced it out is I'm very good at teaching theory. Martin and Jay are also great theory people. Um, but we've got like Chris has got like here's how we're actually going to do it. We've got the latest models. We're gonna train this thing to uh, be like a reasoning model, and he shows you how to actually do it, not just the theory, but you actually build reasoning models from scratch, and it's I mean I'm just tooting my own horn, but it's a really cool resource, and it's a course that we're teaching at the end of the month in February, but hopefully we'll teach it every 6 months or so. So that'd be something people might want to jump in on, and we do educational pricing. It's not a cheap course, but we do definitely have really good educational pricing.
Wow.
So we're trying to make it so something that everyone could come and attend ultimately.
I'm very sure it's a good course, and I'm very sure because I had a podcast with Lewis as well,
Oh,
and
wow. Okay. Yeah.
it was an amazing time for me to talk
Yeah.
to him as well. And I have seen your videos, I have seen his videos, and
Yeah.
uh, I'm pretty sure that this course is gonna be a banger.
Oh,
So
hooray.
definitely.
Yeah, we're
And
excited.
we have this things that we should do when we are starting. What
Yeah.
are the things that you think we should avoid in the starting? Like,
Yeah, what do you avoid? Um, you know, that's a good question. Because I mean, I don't know, I'm better at thinking about like positive things rather than negative things. Things I would focus on are the concepts, because the tools are going to change, right? You know that every 6 months we've got new large language. Gemini's the best. Next 2 months later, ChatGPT's the best. Next a month later, Claude's the best. You know, there's always going to be another model. So, but the concepts behind them don't change. And so I like personally, because I'm a concept kind of guy. I like emphasizing those because that's learning that you can take with you for the rest of your life. You're not just you didn't just learn how to like do something really cool with Gemini only to be out of date in 6 months. So it's
yeah.
important. It's important to focus early, especially early on. It's important to focus on things that will have some that will last. You know, knowledge that won't just last. You know, won't expire in 6 months. So I would focus on theory and try not. I mean, obviously play with the models, but don't get wed to any specific one, right? Because they're going to change. Each one's going to be good at different things, and it's good to just be flexible because that landscape's always going to be changing. And so be prepared to move and change and adapt as needed. Um, so that would be my recommendation is yeah, focus primarily on the theory, but use the models, but use all of them, and don't just specialize on one.
Yeah. And also, like when we are studying these concepts, and there is so much of material online. Like I started it in 2024, and when I started it, I started with the course from Andrew Ng,
Mm-hmm.
the course at Stanford, the
Mm-hmm.
machine learning. And for me to grasp it at first was very difficult.
Yeah.
And similarly, when I went on to find so much information on internet, it became more and more difficult until and unless I streamlined it. So how should we set a deadline? Okay, this topic, and we set some deadlines so that we don't get lost
Yeah.
in the matter itself. So how do you actually visualize it? Like when you are learning something, how do you set your deadlines?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't usually set deadlines because I get sort of obsessed with it and I
Okay.
can't sleep until I figured it out. And so I just have like this internal self motivation thing that kicks in and won't allow me to stop until I'm done. Um, but yeah, I mean, one thing I would recommend is like, and you discovered with the Andrew Ng course is not everybody's teaching style is going to be great for your learning style. And the way, and that's the case for me especially, at least that's the way I feel. And so when I try to learn, I don't just depend on one resource. I look at as many resources as I can, and I try to find much variety as possible so that I can uh, see how different people would talk about it, because they don't often people just repeat other people, but sometimes you'll get different perspectives.
Yeah.
And if you keep looking, often I am able to find something that I can kind of relate to or I can kind of learn from, or at least it gives me a start, gives me a toehold, and then I can kind of build from there. So it's important to not, if the first thing isn't working, don't despair. There's other resources you can try. And specifically like Lewis, like Lewis Serrano, right? I was just
Yeah.
talking to him yesterday, and he's using, he does a lot of learning through large language models, and he was telling me that he'll ask the same question a bunch of different models, and he'll see what the responses are, and he'll use that as his way of sort of generating um different ways to understand the same topic, and he's a big proponent of that, and I think it's a great idea. Is regardless of where you get it, just make sure you get exposed to a wide variety of ways to talk about whatever you need to learn.
I mean, that's so true. That will also clear up your concepts. Once if you can explain and you have so much of exposure, you
Yeah.
just know that what works for you and maybe what doesn't work for you. Like you said that you were talking to some hiring managers. So what are those some of the skills that I should have if tomorrow I'm going for the job?
Well, they were like talking just basic analytics skills, like linear regression. How solid do you feel with linear regression? That's still a very useful analytics tool, even though we've got these large language models. So basic statistics, basic data visualization, basic um, sort of dimension reduction technique, because we often have these really large data sets with lots of different features and things like that. And is there a way we can make sense of that? And so things like principal component analysis is a way of dealing with these
Yeah.
complicated data sets to reduce them to things that we can manage. I think that's it. Those are useful skills. Those are all useful skills to have. Yeah.
I mean, I have a question here. Like right now in this today's world, we are seeing so many people being laid off from the companies,
Mm-hmm.
and they are saying that AI is taking their job.
Yeah.
So, in this era where AI is taking the jobs and new jobs are being created to take the AI tools and make yourself more efficient. So, why is that the companies still emphasize upon having the basics, but they still replace you because they need the AI on your place?
So, I mean, I'll be honest, I can't speak for individual people losing their jobs and things like that. But regardless of what skills you have and what your skill set is, one thing that I've found to be very successful for me, and also take this with a grain of salt, in that I've, this is pre AI, but I believe it still applies to this day, which is in every single job I've ever had. I've been asked to do one thing, but there's usually something else that needs to be done. And maybe it needs to be done instead of the thing that they asked me to do, or maybe it needs to be done in addition to it. But I always, whenever I get a job, I meet everyone I can. I learn what they're doing, I learn how they're doing it, and I learn what I can do to help facilitate them doing it better. So when I worked in the lab, I, instead of just being given the data, I went around to all the people who did the experiments. I said, "Tell me about this experiment. Tell me how it works. Tell me how you did it. Can you show me, like, how, show me. I need to learn." And as a result of kind of learning what everyone was doing, I actually became, I got very good at what I was doing, but I also became indispensable, because I was the only statistician who actually they could talk to, because I understood their research, because I understood their techniques. And that was another way of establishing trust. Whereas you could imagine another statistician who just gets the data and goes, "Okay, I'm going to just do a t-test on this." That statistician is easy to replace, because
Yeah.
anyone can do that, right? Anyone can highlight cells in an Excel spreadsheet and say equals t-test,
Yeah.
right? anyone can do that. You don't need to pay someone a lot of money to do that. But what you do need to pay a lot of money is to someone who understands exactly what are the problems with that data. Is there something I need to be looking out for? Um, like domain specific knowledge about how this experiment was done. That could affect what the results are, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and so my so when you get a job, and it's great to get a job, don't just say, well, they told me to do this, this is all I'm going to do. you know I would look around and say, well, they told me to do this, and maybe I need to do that, and especially because they asked me to do it, it might be important. But they look around, there might be other things they need you to do, and it may be that I've often found that the thing they originally asked me for wasn't what actually needed to be done. And that's what made me indispensable. Not I was able to identify the real problem and work on that and go, look here, this is what really needed to happen. And they're all like, hooray, and
Wow.
that made me an employee that no one wants to fire, right? You want to have these problem solvers, these people that can identify things that need to be done and don't just have to be told what to do. If you find yourself in a position where someone is always telling you what to do, you will not be in that position very long.
That's true.
And it's not even AI that's going to fire you. It's just they're going to fire you because
You are just not capable. You're not able
yeah,
to
you're just not
accept.
capable of it. And I think people forget that you can't just do what you're told. You actually have to go beyond that and do
Yeah.
what needs to be done.
That's, I mean, that's so true of thinking about the working environments where sometimes you see the conflict between the people who do the experiments and people who do the analysis because both of them thinks that the other person doesn't understand the perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I work in
Yes.
a lab where I have the wet lab people with me. I'm the sole person who is like having a computational biology PhD.
Yeah.
But I talk to them and I understand their perspective that how they do, what did they do, and how might it just affect the result.
Yeah.
Will it be
Yeah.
a major one or what? So I think the communication here is very important, that kind
Yeah.
of trust building, as you mentioned. I think
Yeah.
that's very true. And you mentioned that you obsess over the topic when you are learning something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So has it been some time when you were actually, when some wet lab biologist was explaining you some experiment that you were like, oh my God, wait, I need to wrap my head around it.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. That wet lab experiments are like super complicated and yeah, they're often hard for me to understand. And yeah, very yeah. I had to do. I was very fortunate, however, in that. Like I said, I worked in a mouse genetics lab, and my boss, he sent me to a specialized training where I got to learn how to do everything myself, and it was like a summer camp for molecular geneticists,
Wow.
and it was a 3 week long thing, and I made a lot of good friends while I was there, and I got to learn how to do all kinds of crazy stuff, and that really opened my eyes to sort of how the work was done and how um where do I fit in and all that stuff. And so I was really, really lucky. I will say that I got a great boss. I had,
Wow.
my boss, Terry Magnuson, was just one of the best things that's ever happened to me overall. He's been encouraging, and he's always been patient with me and helped me out. So that I got very lucky there. Um, yeah.
Wow. And let's say in your YouTube, when you started the YouTube and when you switched to a full-time YouTuber, what were the three videos that you still remember was the most difficult to make because you were like, okay, this is not simple enough. I need
Yeah.
to make it more simple.
Well, yeah, so one of my most popular videos of all time is a video on principal component analysis. And that video is actually the second draft.
Okay.
My first principal component, actually it's my third draft. I've got two principal component videos that I came out with before that.
Okay.
Um and I feel like I did an okay job in those first two videos, and they're not wrong by any stretch of the imagination. There's two ways to do principal component analysis, and my first two videos focus on one of those two ways, and the third one focuses on the other way. And the other way, it's just easier to understand, and it's
Yeah.
just better in every respect. And it's the way that actual principal component is analysis is actually done. The other way, the first way that I did it, is strangely enough the way principal component analysis is typically taught.
Yeah.
So there's a standard way of teaching principal component analysis, but interestingly enough, that standard way of teaching it is different from the standard way of doing it.
Wow.
And what I found is that if I focused on the way that it's actually being done, it's actually easier to understand. It's much more intuitive and much more straightforward.
Yeah.
And so that third video is like, I finally got it. And so that was a hard one. It took years to get to where I could do that. And that was super hard. Another really hard one for me that I spent years on was my basic linear regression video. In fact, I'm working on a new linear regression video now that I'm going to come out with in the next couple of weeks that I'm really excited about, because I'm like, I finally have a better way of teaching this. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. So some stuff I do come back to, but both those topics, principal component analysis and linear regression, I literally spent years of my life thinking about and trying to figure out a good way to explain. And I finally got stuff, but years later, I'm like, oh, I think I've even got something better.
Like you mentioned, the PCA, it's actually easy to teach it the way it is done and the way it is taught. Then why it is not taught the way it is done?
Yeah, right. I think it's just momentum. Like people are taught one way, and then they go, well, I'm just going to teach it the same way. And then they teach another generation of people this old way that nobody actually does anymore. And it just sort of perpetuates itself, and that people tend to teach the way they learn.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that as well, because my first two videos were exactly the way I learned it. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's another way to do this. Let's learn about that other thing. And then I was like, oh, this is way better. And so yeah, I don't know. I think it's just momentum, and it's not necessarily good. It's not very helpful. I think it's good to question all that stuff. Like, why are we teaching it this way? Why are we learning it this way? Is there a better way? You have to always ask those questions, or at
Yeah.
least I do. And sometimes I come up with a better solution.
Yeah, I mean, now that I think of these topics, sometimes they're not as confusing as we really think them to be.
Yeah. Yeah, oftentimes that's the case.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
for me, I remember when I was learning about SVM, that
Uh-huh.
was like when I was starting with machine learning, that was one of the most difficult things I was having in my mind. So many parameters and this and that. And then I just keep it all aside. I'm like, okay, it's just clustering points. It's basically predicting -1, 1. Make it simple. It has some parameters, and then you set the parameters of how you want it to be.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we are so lost in the technical detail that we lose hold of the concept itself. Like if I ask myself, because I did that, and when I was learning it, do I understand why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Apart from the parameters I'm putting in blindly, do I really know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So I think also because I taught myself when I was doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
And at that point of time, some of the concepts were nightmare.
Yeah.
Back propagation came like, oh my God, what
Yeah,
is
right.
this? What is this?
Yeah.
So I think it is just educators like you who can actually teach it in a way that we can understand it.
Yeah. Yes, support vector machines is a great example of something that's infinitely more complicated sounding than it actually is. It's pretty straightforward once you understand the concepts of what it's doing, but it's not often taught that way. It's often taught with really complicated looking equations and without much visualization. But when
Yeah.
you can see that, like, when you can illustrate it and you can see what it's actually doing, what it's doing is very straightforward. It's just drawing a line that separates two categories. It's like, oh, I can do that. I can
Yeah,
draw a line. I can draw a straight line. It's not even a fancy line. It's just a straight
straight
line.
line. It's so true. It's it's literally true. I mean, sometimes we just tend to complicate concepts just because it looks fancy. That okay, we know
Yeah.
the complicated concept.
Yeah.
And now this brings me to the end of the podcast, but I have a rapid fire round with you.
Okay, sure.
And you're the first person I'm having this with.
Okay.
And
Hooray.
okay, so my first question is that what is that one book that is a non-technical book that you think people should read?
like a fiction, like a
Yeah, the book like the book you really like and you think people should definitely give it a read.
well, there's a lot of books that I love. One of my there's a lot of books that I love.
Go ahead. A lot is
Um,
also good.
and there's an American writer from like 100 years ago called Mark Twain, and basically anything written by Mark Twain is going to be awesome. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a big Mark Twain fan. Um, so I'll just say, yeah, anything by Mark Twain, read it. It's
Okay.
just it's a gem.
Ah, a book that inspires you.
Oh, what's a good inspiring book? Anything that's really well written. I love the way language can. I love like certain phrases. Another book I like is called A Confederacy of Dunces, and it has these lines, these like phrases that I think are just hilarious.
Okay.
And they're very subtle. So it one of my favorite lines is it says, Patrolman Mancuso's love for the motorcycle was platonically intense. And for something about that, like, just, it's such a simple phrase, but it says so much. And it's just like this nugget of awesomeness. And I read something like that and I go, oh, why, I don't know. It inspires me to be a better writer, I guess, in a way. I've been thinking about writing because I just published a new book on statistics. Um, so I've been thinking about writing a lot, and so that's the kind of stuff that's been inspiring me lately. It's like writers that are really good and have a really good control over language. I find that kind of inspiring.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would be that one piece of advice that you received in any time or in any point of your career that you still carry with you today?
Yeah, something my dad taught me, and his dad taught him, which is be a good helper.
Okay.
And what it means to be a good helper is to not wait for people to tell you what to do, but to look around and be curious about what's going on around you. And when you're curious, you can find out what needs to be done. And my dad always gives this example is when he was a kid, his dad, so my grandfather, was an elevator repairman.
Okay.
And on the weekends, my dad would go help my grandfather repair elevators. And at first my dad wasn't very much of he wasn't a good helper, and my grandfather would always have to say, I need this tool, and my dad would give him the tool, and my grandfather said, to be a good helper, you should have the tool ready before I ask for it.
Okay.
Um, and the way you learn how to do that is you observe and you watch what they're doing. You go, oh, he's going to need this tool. He's going to need this. He's going to need the screwdriver next, or he's going to need the wire clippers or something. You can see what they're doing and you can anticipate what their needs are going to be. And that's how my grandfather taught my dad how to be a good helper. And I learned how to do that as well, where you look around and you go, well, what needs to be done, and how, what tools do they need, and what needs to be in place, and how can I be helpful? And like I said, career wise, that's probably the single most best piece of advice I've had, and I still think it applies. If you can be a good helper and anticipate what people need to get done, then you can become indispensable. You're not going to get fired for a silly reason. You might get fired because the company goes under, and everybody gets laid off, and that's not your fault at all. But if you can make yourself a good helper, people are always going to fight to put you on their team.
I mean, that is such a good advice, and it suits and it fits in today's time just so well that if you just observe, you'll exactly know what skills you want and you'll just be there with those.
Yeah.
I'm gonna carry it with me for sure.
Oh, hooray.
And what is that one habit that you picked early in your career that was the most helpful?
Oh, a habit of mine is I do tend to be I'm very self-motivated, but I tend to uh keep a pretty good schedule.
Okay.
Um and so I'm pretty organized, and I think that's helpful, especially when I'm working on my own.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't actually have anyone tell, I don't have deadlines. I don't have anyone saying I need this by end of day or end of week or something like that. I don't have that kind of stuff. So I have to find my own way to sort of keep myself on a schedule. And I've just always been organized and sort of goal oriented. And I thought, well, I'd be nice. I don't know. I just feel like it would be nice to have a video out. I haven't had a video out for a while. It'd be nice to have one out. But in order to do that, it takes a lot of preparation. And I
Yeah.
just organize and I plan and I prepare and I schedule everything so that I can get the work done in a timely manner. And I've just always been that way.
I mean, I'm just obsessive over the schedules.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm literal obsessive. I am control freak over the schedules. And the last question is, if anyone in their 20s and they're starting a career in AI, in data science, what would be that one piece of advice you would give to them?
Oh, if one piece of advice for people starting their career in AI and data science is don't skip the fundamentals and don't be. I mean, AI is awesome, but don't be blinded by how awesome it is, and make sure you have the fundamentals solid. Because they're not going to go anywhere. They've been around for a long time, and like I was saying, like basic techniques like linear regression aren't going anywhere. They'll be around for a lot longer. And if you know how to use those tools, you're going to be able to do a lot of different things.
Wow. I mean, that brings me to the end of the podcast, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna read Mark Twain for sure.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
I have never read him. I have
Yeah.
heard about him, but I've never
Yeah.
read his books, but now it's on my reading list.
Well, you're in Germany.
Yeah.
He's got a book called Innocence Abroad, which is it's about his trip to Europe,
Okay.
and it's a travel guide. He was at the time he was writing letters. He was is this is back in the day 1800s, right? But it's kind of a funny story about him traveling through Europe as an American who'd never been there before, and kind of like all the ups and downs and the crazy things he went through, and he goes all around the Mediterranean. It's a pretty cool book
Wow.
to read it from his perspective.
I'm gonna start with this one then,
Yeah.
for
Hooray.
sure. And I will just stop the recording.
Yeah.